Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's Lean Publishing Tip of the Day live stream, where I'm going to be talking a little bit about doing nonfiction book research. As usual, if you're watching the recording of this video, which is going to be most people most of the time, please just skip ahead to the 2-minute mark. Up until then, we just do a little bit of housekeeping and give people who might be kind of happen to see this live stream go live a chance to join. As always, there is an accompanying blog post for the Lean Publishing Tip of the Day. You can find these on our blog at leanpub.com/blog. If you don't see the post that you're looking for there, just click the magnifying glass and search for the keywords that you might see on the blog post in this video. You can find the recordings for these videos on our YouTube channel at LeanPub. Please like and subscribe and all that. The idea behind these live streams is that we kind of provide sort of like self-publishing tips and advice on strategy and tactics, that it's evolving and kind of keeping up with the trends and the times, things like that. Also, of course, there's going to be kind of essentially kind of informal LeanPub how-tos where I sort of demo you how things work on LeanPub, show you new features, things like that, and more generally just explain LeanPub's approach to writing books and courses and to self-publishing and everything along those lines. If you have a topic that you'd like me to discuss on anything related to what I just talked about, please just let me know. You can contact us at hello@leanpub.com or find us on social media pretty easily. And if you'd like me to talk about something that I've talked about in the past, but to cover it again, maybe from a different angle or given some kind of development in technology or e-commerce or something like that, please just let me know. I'm happy to talk about the latest developments. I try to keep up on things, and if you ask me about something that I haven't heard about, I'll be happy to look into it and consider doing a Lean Publishing Tip of the Day about it. So with all that said, let's do our normal countdown to the 2-minute mark. So 3, 2, 1. Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to the 2-minute mark of today's Lean Publishing Tip of the Day, where I'm going to be talking about nonfiction research. So just to sort of put my cards on the table, as it were, I've sort of done over 300, in-depth podcast interviews with LeanPub authors from all around the world, writing all kinds of topics, and asked each and every one of them about their writing process. I've sort of seen, many, many LeanPub books, and it's seen many, many practices and approaches for nonfiction book research and publishing, books on various topics. When nonfiction book can be, a computer programming book, can be a computer programming book about an old programming language. It can be about a new programming language. It can be about changes in programming languages, for example. Those can actually be some of in their own way, the kind of hardest nonfiction books to write, although that's a stupid, kind of category to apply hardest. I mean, that just, every book is a challenge, and every, there's no such thing as basically, the simplest thing might be the hardest, and it depends on the person, et cetera. Anyway, of course, the sort of more conventional, when you think about a nonfiction book, you might think about, kind of books on history, books on, the history of stamp collection, books on the history of war, books on the history of a country, things like that. Also, a kind of very popular thing is, biographies and autobiographies, of course, are a very important type of nonfiction book. There's also kind of philosophy, which is nonfiction, in my opinion, most of the time. And, basically a kind of any academic, sort of area is going to be essentially nonfiction. The biggest kind of, project that I've nonfiction kind of book project that I've done is I wrote a doctoral thesis years ago in English, and kind of / politics / and philosophy. This was a multi-year project and involved reading hundreds of thousands of pages of books and taking copious notes and things like that. So today I just thought I'd share some high-level kind of advice that I have based on all that experience of my own, but mostly the kind of experience of working with authors and watching authors face this challenge. So you're going to be doing a lot of research if you're writing a nonfiction book. You're going to be pulling a lot of materials together. These days, that typically means, of course, digital materials. You might have physical files or physical documents or physical objects even that you're going to be that are going to be playing a role in your research. But actually, what you're probably going to be doing is taking pictures of all of them with your phone, and then you're going to have digital files, which will have very detailed photos of these things. Of course, there are apps and stuff that can do kind of 3D kind of analysis of photos and things like that now. So, as a matter of archiving, taking photos is a more robust way of archiving objects than it used to be in the past. But basically, what you're going to have is a lot of digital files. These are going to be a combination of things like book files, documents, like I said, photographs, um, and other kinds of things. And you're going to have lots of these files over time. You're going to be getting more and more every day. You're going to be, who knows what circumstance you're going to be in when you're getting them. You're going to be sitting in a library with a laptop, or you're going to be, having a thought, because your notes count as, I would say. I mean, let's count your notes in what we're talking about here, which is gathering and collecting information. Research does include notes. So I'll give you some little advice about that. But the first and most important thing is to have a meaningful, high level folder structure. And I'm going to be specific here, on a computer. If you're doing research for a book, don't do it on your phone or a tablet. That's not the right way to do it. That's just so fiddly. I'm not saying don't use them. Obviously, I already talked about using them. Use them, but you want to have a computer with a folder structure on it. That's an incredibly important thing, because again, you might be, and you want to have backup hard drive. Of course, you back up to the cloud if you want to, but like, the cloud is actually, cloud storage for files is important. I use it, but it's also unstable and unpredictable. You want to have locally stored and saved folders with files in them, all of it, and you want to have an external hard drive, or two or three of your own that you own, that you can store your files and folders on. Absolutely crucial to doing this kind of thing, to doing long-term kind of, in-depth research on a book. And you want to have a meaningful folder structure for it. How this works will be up to you, of course, but you want then, as they say in sort of all sorts of areas, like, computer software engineering and, engineering in general, naming is one of the hardest things you're going to do. But, probably the high level, folder name will be the name of your book title, or your working book title. But then you're going to want to come up with kind of, structures there. I would personally go by topic, not by file type. You can search by file type in most computers. So you don't want to have like an images folder. What you're going to want to do is have a kind of topics folder. You might want to break it down into chapters, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, and then the research for those chapters is all in there. One thing I would do, so you're gonna, you come up with a structure that you keep, that makes sense to you. That you imagine if you stopped working on your book for 6 months, which you actually might end up doing, and you came back to it. Would you understand your folder structure? Would it be clear? If there's a file that you remember, if there's something that you remember having found, you should be able to find it without stressing about it or worrying about it. You should know that, like, what, I'm going to be able to just go and find that one way or another. So build and maintain a meaningful folder structure, and use a consistent folder and folder file and internet bookmark naming methodology. If you're like me, a lot of the research that you're going to do is going to be on the internet, and you're going to want to save the web addresses. Do that in a folder structure in your bookmarks. I use Chrome. Bookmarks have a folder structure that follows the conventions or methodology that you're using on your computer for your files. One thing to note is that you can export your bookmarks. Do that. Make a little noting, make a little item recurring monthly in your calendar to sort of like export your bookmarks, and you're going to have a file somewhere in your research folder structure where you save those bookmarks. That's really important, because you might switch computers. Who knows what might happen, but you can actually save your bookmarks. If you do bookmark kind of based, if you use internet bookmarks for research like I do, you'll end up with thousands of links over time. Give them good names and stuff like that when you're saving the bookmark. Use a coherent folder structure. The next thing I want to talk about is beware using. This is me personally. I do not recommend using note-taking apps and research apps. I know that people who use them love them. I highly recommend not using them. You should have your own folder structure. You should have your own notes. Typically, you could keep them in Microsoft Word or something like Word or Pages or plain text, but I recommend plain text if you're willing to do that, just .txt files on your computer. When you use these apps, the thing about your folder structure on your computer is that it doesn't change unless you change it. Things go where you put them. Things don't get moved around. And with apps, who knows what might happen when you open it up next time. Uh, there might be people who have a kind of the one thing that I find kind of infuriating about contemporary kind of design for sort of web apps and stuff like that is the idea that you should have a delightful experience. I don't want a delightful experience with the most delight I can have with respect to sort of my research on my nonfiction book and how my folders and files and everything is stored is that it doesn't change on me, that it's the same, that it's the way I set it up. Um, when you're using an app, things can go missing. They can change the UI. If you want to store something somewhere again, it might just be all gone. Those companies, can go under, or they can get acquired and then ruined. Um, and like I said, in this context, like in the context of doing your research, an improvement might not be an improvement at all because it makes finding things and storing things more difficult. And again, research is at the level I've been talking about up until this point. It's about storing stuff, and you want to store things in the most stable way you can. The next thing I want to mention is that if you're doing research and you're doing text files where you're keeping notes. So, for example, when I was doing my doctorate, every book that I was working on would have a folder, and every book that I read had a folder, and then that folder had a text file, which was like book title dash notes, and then I would have a file number. So then it would 1.00 would be at the end of it. Every time I opened it, I would save a new version and add 1 at the end, so 1.01, and then I would type out my notes. And I would sort of like note the page 132. Maybe I'm typing out a quotation. But what you want to do if you're doing this process is have hashtags that you do at the beginning or end or above or below, whatever. You have a hashtag system that you use where you do a little hashtag for anything that's kind of like relevant to you. So if you're doing year-based research, for example, where like what happened in what year or what date, hashtag, little date 2026 0528. Hashtag that, then you can search for those hashtags later on. That's an incredibly powerful way of doing research. It can also be like, if you're doing research on, if you're doing kind of literary research, you might like if there might be a subject like greed, for example. So you do hashtag greed if a quote is relevant to greed. I can't recommend this method enough. So use hashtags, keywords, wildcards, whatever you want to call them, stuff like that. Very important. And the last thing I wanted to talk about today, we have this is because we've been working on this ourselves, but like having all of your research well named, including image files, all that kind of stuff, and all kinds of file types in a folder on your computer means you can unlock incredibly powerful AI kind of uses. I say applications in the blog post. Don't confuse that with apps. I mean the literal kind of applications of AI to your research. Setting AI onto your research with prompts, if it's all in one folder and it's structured, can be incredibly powerful. Basically, it's kind of like an amazing time to live when it comes to research, where you can structure your own folders thing, and you can go like, find me all the quotes about this subject, find me all the hashtags about that, and it can kind of find you the quotes that you need that you've stored in your research folders. Find me this image, all that kind of stuff. And finding is just the beginning of it. We built for our Ghost AI Claude code skill. We've added a research skill, which is really amazing. And one of the things it's going to do is it's going to look in kind of powerful ways at the research that you've got on your computer. And that was actually kind of the reason that I did this Lean Publishing Tip of the Day today. If you're interested in learning more about Ghost AI, we've got events at LeanPub now. Just go to the top of our homepage, leanpub.com, click events, and you'll find the Ghost AI events there and the book workshop event there as well. So I definitely recommend, if you're interested, the seats are free. There's also paid seats, which are basically discounts on author memberships. If that doesn't make sense, you'll know what I mean when you see it. So definitely highly recommend doing that. It's a great deal and it's a great use of your time. So yeah, check out LeanPub events. And yeah, if you jumped into this live stream late, if you want to see the whole thing, please go to our YouTube channel at LeanPub later on today or tomorrow, and it'll be there stored in perpetuity for you to watch at your leisure anytime. And please like and subscribe and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, thank you very much, everyone, for watching this live stream / recording today.